Hi, I'm Rory Greener from XR Today, bringing you the latest in news and conversation from the extended reality space. Today, Jay Wright, the CEO and co-founder of Campfire, joins us to discuss recent successes via MetaQuest deployment and its further implications for Campfire and beyond. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jay. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rory. It's great to be with you.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So, why don't you shed some insight into this MetaQuest deployment? What from this deployment have you noticed? I see you've had its successes in terms of growth rate. So, how does this show the MetaQuest device becoming more than a consumer tool, perhaps turning into an enterprise tool?
I think the really interesting phenomenon with Quest 3 has been the fact that it's a consumer device is what's making it successful as an enterprise device. That might sound a little counterintuitive to folks, but what we're seeing is that customers will buy this Quest 3 as a consumer for gaming or exercise or what you will, and then they'll take it to work, have the idea, oh my gosh, we could put 3D models that we have in this Quest, be able to share them and either be able to do design reviews or many of them think about sales first, and then just download the app from the Quest store and try it. So that would not otherwise happen if it was not a consumer device that they already had to take to work. And I also think it's worth noting this is the same sort of phenomenon we saw with early iPhone days, right? Which was a consumer device, and we called it, I think, the consumerization of IT phenomenon. But people bought these as consumers, took them to work, and just started using them there and drove their adoption. So, like I said, a little counterintuitive, but the fact that it is consumer is making it additionally a great device in enterprise.
Brilliant. And could you also shed some light into what these MetaQuest users are able to do with the Campfire application? I guess for both VR and MR headset users.
I think the basic capability is to be able to take 3D models, largely 3D models of physical things and places, and be able to share them very simply with others as if they're all around them together, as if you're around a campfire. And so we're all familiar with collaboration tools today in the 2D domain, things like Google Docs and PowerPoint, and they're all very simple to use and intuitive. We sort of brought that same ease of use and simplicity to Campfire. So we say, hey, it's just as easy to copy and paste 3D models into Campfire scenes as it is to work with pictures and text and PowerPoint. But we just make it extremely easy to share that content. And what that does is when you could share that content very easily, we've created a very flexible tool that works for a wide variety of enterprise workflows. A lot of them that have to do with product development and virtual prototyping, the ability to share 3D models for sales, so I can do sales calls with complex equipment and walk people through it, as well as for training scenarios, especially in instructor-led training where I want to walk from a group of people through something.
Fantastic. And then could you also shed some insight into how the MetaQuest growth rate, how did that lead into perhaps a decision or a move towards launching on Apple Vision Pro? And then equally, how do you feel about that launch?
So we were extremely happy with what we saw in Quest. And we also saw a lot of our larger customers had bought Vision Pros. And I think we're very excited about the experience on Vision Pro. You know, it's really a very high fidelity Halo experience. And I think we were very excited to see what Campfire was going to look like there, and our customers were. I think the other aspect that made us want to get started and move to Vision Pro is to really understand and figure out this new interaction model that we really believe in. And that's this interaction model where we're kind of moving from controllers, that people know how to use, to how we're going to adapt that for this sort of gaze and pinch interface that we have on Vision Pro. And we still got some work to do there. It's non-trivial, I think, to make a really simple interface that'll work with controllers and then also can adapt with gaze and pinch. But that's something that we really focus on and take a lot of time. So Campfire can be familiar to users regardless on the device they start on or move to.
Brilliant. And obviously, Apple Vision Pro and the Meta Quest are the two leading horses in that race, really. Could you perhaps
Yeah.
give some insight into the difference between developing for each platform? Maybe there's some lessons learned during those processes.
Yeah, I think look, the biggest difference in developing is going to be dealing with the different interaction model that I mentioned. On Quest, you've got controllers, that's a very familiar interface, and now that you've got sort of this gaze and pinch, it's a very, very different approach. So that is without a question sort of challenge number one. And maybe next challenge, sort of number two, Rory, would be a little bit more technical, but it just has to do with some of the tools and the early state of tools on Vision Pro, and specifically the tools like the Unity tool chain. So those things are just early and still evolving. So, as gaps are filled for functionality that has been there on other platforms and isn't quite there or implemented in Vision Pro, there's a little bit of friction to overcome. But I think those things will all take care of themselves in the very near future. They're moving very quickly to address them.
Fantastic. And just a quick expansion upon that. There's a little bit of a discussion there between Meta being an open framework, or the Meta Quest framework being open, compared to Apple's more walled garden approach to their development, to their OS and the development cycle. How do you feel about that? Is that something that's of note from your perspective, or is it fairly seamless in terms of developing for a walled garden over a perceived open one?
Yeah, I think open's a little bit of a loaded term. I think when it comes to a developer perspective, I wouldn't say one is any more sort of open than the other, right? For both of those, you got to follow some rules, use some SDKs, and put apps into an app store with an approval process. So I really can't say one is more open than the other. It is probably worth noting that at least on the enterprise side, Apple has opened up some things that Meta has yet to open up, specifically camera access, most recently with Vision OS 2. So, I think be careful with the use of the term, but from our perspective, I wouldn't call one more open than another today.
That's a great insight, thank you. And then talking again, excuse me, about Campfire's current growth rate and that success
Yeah,
story. What does that indicate
yeah.
for the adoption of MR headsets, VR headsets? And do you feel like that's your growth rate, and I imagine others as well, will lead to a bit of a better public belief in immersive collaboration tools on the whole?
Yeah, that's a good one. And let me come at this from the enterprise perspective. But I think there's two really big takeaways here. One, it's hard to overstate sort of the impact pass through has had on the device landscape. I mean, XR headsets, I think, for all intents and purposes, have been redefined and simplified as a category. But adding pass through to a VR headset, in my mind, has made every VR headset before it that does not have pass through a doorstop. And we're even seeing use cases in enterprise that previously would have been done on a HoloLens or Magic Leap 2 move over to a Quest 3 and pass through device. So it is a whole new world now in headscape, in headset land. And I think for folks that are in enterprise, this means, hey, if you've tried this stuff before, you've looked at it before, people were uncomfortable or felt isolated and the project didn't move forward, it's time to look again because the experience has changed dramatically and there's a lot less friction for a lot more people. So I think that's sort of big takeaway number one, whole new world for headsets. And I think the other one is that immersive collaboration, as you refer to it, I don't think that's what most people think it is. I think when most people think about immersive collaboration, they go to this metaverse idea where you've got a bunch of avatars in a virtual room, and we're doing Zoom calls, we're sharing our PowerPoint inside this virtual environment as avatars. And look, I'm not sure what problem that solves. I recognize some people do it, but it's certainly not getting widespread adoption, right? It turns out that the type of call that we're having now and screen sharing right now is very, very good for 2D sort of stuff. So what we should be doing in these headsets and immersive collaboration is things that these can uniquely do and other platforms can't. And what these headsets can uniquely do is help us perceive digital 3D content as if it's physical. And that's the capability we are taking advantage of in Campfire, is helping people perceive that digital information as physical. Because if I can help them perceive that and collaborate with that digital information as physical, I am effectively letting them work with atoms as bits, and I am saving people from having to get on airplanes to travel and ship physical things around. So yeah, it's not about the avatars in the digital space. It's about collaborating and taking advantage of what the platform does best and well, and that's sharing 3D content.
Fantastic. That's a really great insight there. And just to wrap off quickly, based on that future of pass through workplace success, perhaps, what is the
Yeah.
future of the Vision Pro in your eyes? Where will that be in the next few years? Recently, or this month of recording, they're going to hit their final international um, scale of distribution with the UK that they announced at
Yeah.
WWDC. So quickly, what's the future? What's the future of Vision Pro in your eyes?
Well, let me give you a little bit of context. I've been around a little while, so I've had the opportunity to be very early or first on a lot of new devices. Apple IIs, a PC, a Mac, a Palm, iPhone, everything. And I got to tell you, I have never tried any sort of first generation device that allowed me to see so far into the future as we could with Vision Pro. My first couple hours with this thing were sitting at home and just tossing windows all over the place, right? Doing a little TV watching, doing a little bit of FaceTime, throwing up my Teams window. And Rory, I was probably in there, as I mentioned. Well, I was in there over 2 hours. I just had my battery plugged into the wall, just sitting there. And I'll tell you, when it was dinner time and I had to pull that thing off and put it down, I was really let down, right? I was really let down that now the only way I could actually look at bits in front of me was that rectangle sitting on my lap or that smaller rectangle in my hand. And it was a real bummer. So for me, it was very clear that the future of this thing, at least for me, is an alternative or a replacement for all the screens I have in certain situations. I think situations where I'm alone. So, if I'm going to be alone at home, if I'm alone at work, if I'm alone traveling, I want this thing with me, or ideally, I think for more people, maybe, a lighter, sort of cheaper one. But oh my gosh, I think there's an exciting future there, and I'm looking forward to Apple taking us down the road to make it happen.
Brilliant, very well said. I appreciate your insight. I can tell it's a real expert insight as well. So thank you so much for everything you said today. All greatly insightful for our audience. And just for our audience, quickly, what's the best call of action? Where can people learn more?
Campfire3D.com.
Fantastic. Thank you
That's
so much
uh,
for your
that's our
time.
website. Thank you, Rory. Keep doing what you do.
Brilliant. Thank you
Thanks.
so
Bye
much.
bye.
That's it from myself. You can get more news by subscribing to the XR Today news channel and by following our social pages.